David Park had been a prisoner for 3 years. He remembered the day they caught him like it was yesterday. His small cargo ship had drifted into Valtteri space by accident. The navigation system had failed, and before he could fix it, their warships surrounded him. They did not ask questions. They did not care that he was just a simple engineer trying to deliver supplies to a mining colony. To them, he was just another human, another animal to be sold. The auction was the worst day of his life. Tall, silver-skinned aliens walked around him like he was a piece of furniture. They poked his arms. They checked his teeth. They talked about him like he could not understand them. But David was smart. He listened. He learned. Within 6 months, he could speak their language better than some of them. They sold him to the royal palace, not as a house servant or a cook. No, David was sent to the deep levels beneath the great building. His job was to fix the old heating systems that kept the palace warm. The work was hard. The tunnels were hot and dark. Other human prisoners worked beside him, but many of them did not last long. The heat broke them. The loneliness broke them. The hopelessness broke them. But David refused to break. Every night, after his work was done, he would find a quiet corner and read. He had managed to hide a small tablet with books from Earth, poetry mostly, stories about love and loss and hope. The words reminded him that he was still human, that he still had a soul, that he was more than what they said he was. One night changed everything. David was fixing a broken pipe near the royal gardens. It was late, and the palace was quiet. He liked working at night because the guards did not watch him so closely. He had finished the repair and was sitting against a wall, reading a poem about the moon, when he heard soft footsteps. He looked up and saw her. She was tall, like all Valtteri, with silver skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. Blue patterns ran across her arms and face, shining like tiny stars. Her eyes were large and purple, and they were staring at him with a mix of fear and curiosity. She wore a simple dress, but even David could see it was made of expensive material. This was no servant. "You are a human," she said. Her voice was soft, almost musical. David slowly closed his tablet. "Yes. You can speak our language?" "Yes." She took a step closer, tilting her head like a curious bird. "They say humans are stupid, like animals." David felt a flash of anger, but he kept his voice calm. "They say a lot of things. Most of them are wrong." The alien girl blinked. No one had ever talked to her like that. She was Princess Yuna, the only daughter of Queen Vara, ruler of the entire Valtteri Empire. People bowed to her. People feared her mother. No one talked back to her. She found she liked it. "What are you doing?" she asked, pointing at the tablet. "Reading." "What is reading?" David almost laughed. "You do not know what reading is?" Yuna's cheeks turned a darker shade of silver. "I know what reading is." "I mean, what are you reading?" "Poetry. From my world, Earth." She sat down across from him, her dress pooling around her like water. "Tell me about it." So David did. He told her about the poem he was reading. It was about a man who loved a woman he could not have, about waiting and hoping and never giving up. Yuna listened with wide eyes. Valtteri did not write poetry like this. Their art was cold and logical. This was something different. Something warm. "That is beautiful," she whispered when he finished. David looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, past the silver skin and glowing marks. He saw a young woman who was lonely, who was trapped in her own way. The palace was a prison for her too, just made of gold instead of chains. "What is your name?" he asked. "Yuna. I am David." She smiled, and it was like watching a star being born. "David, that is a strange name." Una is a strange name too, he replied, and she laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in months. After that night, Una kept coming back. At first, it was once a week, then twice, then every night. She would sneak away from her guards and find David in the tunnels. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing. David told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests, about cities that reached the clouds and villages where people knew each other's names. He told her about his family, his grandmother who taught him old Korean songs, his mother who made the best food, his father who taught him to fix anything with his hands. Una told him about her life, about growing up in the palace with no friends, about her mother who was always busy ruling the empire, about the pressure to be perfect, to be cold, to be a queen. She had never been allowed to be just a girl. With David, she could be herself. Months turned into a year. A year turned into 2. Their friendship grew deeper. They started to share things they had never told anyone. Their fears, their dreams, their secrets. David knew he was falling in love with her. He tried to stop it. She was a princess. He was a slave. There was no future for them. But the heart does not listen to logic. Every time she smiled at him, he fell a little more. Una felt the same way. She had met princes from 100 worlds. Rich, powerful, handsome by Velthury standards. None of them made her feel the way David did. When she was with him, she felt alive. She felt real. She felt like she mattered, not because of her crown, but because of who she was. One night, after 2 years of secret meetings, Una finally said the words out loud. "I love you, David." David closed his eyes. He should push her away. He should protect her from the danger of loving him. But when he opened his eyes and saw her face, full of hope and fear, he could not lie. "I love you too, Una." She threw her arms around him, and he held her tight. In that moment, they were not a princess and a slave. They were just 2 people who had found each other in the darkness. But darkness has eyes. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching. 2 more years passed after that night. David and Una's love grew stronger with each secret meeting. They learned everything about each other. The way David scratched his head when he was thinking. The way Una's glowing marks turned brighter when she was happy. Small things that meant everything. Their meetings became more dangerous. Una started bringing David food from the royal kitchen. Real food, not the gray paste they fed to human workers. David would taste meats and fruits he had never seen before, and Una would laugh at the faces he made. In return, David taught her human songs. Old Korean melodies his grandmother used to sing. Una's voice was beautiful, and sometimes David would just close his eyes and listen, pretending they were somewhere else. Somewhere safe, but the palace was never safe. High Commander Thane was one of the most powerful men in the Empire. He led the Velthury armies and had won countless battles. He was tall, even for his people, with cold blue eyes and silver skin marked with battle scars. He was also cruel. David had seen him walk through the servant areas, kicking humans who did not bow fast enough. Thane hated humans more than anyone, and Thane wanted Una. For years, he had asked Queen Vara for permission to marry the princess. The queen had not said yes, but she had not said no either. Thane was patient. He knew that one day, Una would be his. She was the path to the throne, and Thane wanted power more than anything. But lately, something had changed. Una no longer attended the court events where Thane could show off for her. She refused his gifts. She barely looked at him when they passed in the halls. At first, Thane thought she was just being difficult. Princesses were like that. But then he noticed other things. She smiled too much. She hummed strange songs. She disappeared at night. Thane was not stupid. He knew something was wrong. So he did what he always did. He sent spies. 3 soldiers, loyal only to him, started following the princess. They were careful. They stayed in the shadows. For weeks, they found nothing. Yuna was clever. She took different paths each night. She doubled back. She waited to make sure no one was following. But even clever people make mistakes. One night, Yuna was in a hurry. She had spent too long at a boring dinner with foreign ambassadors, and she was late to meet David. She did not check the corners as carefully as usual. She did not see the 3 shadows following her into the tunnels. David was waiting for her in their usual spot, a small room behind the old generators. When she came in, he stood up and opened his arms. She ran to him and kissed him, the way she always did, the way that made everything else disappear. They did not hear the soft gasp from the doorway. The 3 soldiers watched from the darkness. They saw the human holding their princess. They saw her kissing him like he was her lover. One of them raised a weapon, ready to shoot David on the spot. But the leader stopped him. Thane would want to know about this himself. David felt something, a cold feeling in his chest. The instinct that had kept him alive for years in this place. He pulled back from Yuna and looked toward the door. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then, a tiny movement. A reflection of light on armor. "Yuna," he whispered. "We are not alone." Her eyes went wide. She turned and saw them too. 3 soldiers stepping out of the shadows. Their faces showed disgust and triumph. "Princess," the leader said. "The High Commander will be very interested to hear about this." Yuna stepped forward, trying to act like a princess. "You will say nothing. That is an order." The soldier laughed. "You are not queen yet, little princess. And when Thane finds out you have been playing with this animal, you never will be." David moved fast. He grabbed a metal pipe from the floor and stepped between Yuna and the soldiers. "Run," he told her. "Go now. I will not leave you. If they take you, there is no hope for either of us. Go. Find a way to explain. I will handle this." The soldiers raised their weapons. They expected David to fight, to attack them like the savage they thought humans were. If he did, they could kill him right here and no one would ask questions. But David did something they did not expect. He dropped the pipe. "If you kill me now," David said calmly, "you will never know the full truth. Maybe there are other humans meeting with noble ladies. Maybe this is bigger than you think. Kill me, and you lose the chance to uncover everything. But take me to Thane, and he can question me himself." It was a lie. There was nothing else to uncover. But the soldiers were not smart enough to know that. They looked at each other, confused. Finally, the leader nodded. "Fine, we take the human. Princess, you will return to your rooms. Say nothing about this. Thane will decide what happens next." Yuna looked at David with tears in her eyes. He gave her a small smile. "It will be okay," he said. "Trust me." She did not want to leave. Every part of her screamed to stay, to fight, to protect the man she loved. But she knew David was right. If she fought now, they would both die. She needed time. She needed to think. "I will save you," she whispered. "I promise." Then she ran. The soldiers grabbed David and dragged him away. As they walked through the dark tunnels, David's mind was racing. He had bought some time, but not much. Soon, Thane would know everything. Soon, the Queen would know. And when that happened, there would be no more hiding. He thought about Yuna, about her smile, about the way she said his name, about the life they had dreamed of together, knowing it could never be real. Maybe it was foolish to love her. Maybe it was stupid to hope. But David had learned something in his years as a prisoner. Humans were not the strongest or the fastest. They did not live the longest or think the clearest. But they had one thing no other species seemed to understand. They kept going. No matter how bad things got, no matter how hopeless it seemed, humans kept going. They crawled when they could not walk. They whispered when they could not shout. They hoped when there was nothing left to hope for. David did not know what would happen next. He did not know if he would live to see another day. But he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to give up. Not on himself. Not on Una. Not on the stubborn, crazy, impossible love that had grown between them. The soldiers threw him into a dark cell and locked the door. David sat in the corner and waited. Somewhere above him, he knew Una was doing the same thing. Waiting, planning, hoping the storm was coming. And when it hit, nothing would ever be the same. Queen Vara had ruled the Velthari Empire for over 800 years. She had seen wars and plagues. She had watched stars die and new worlds be born. She had buried 2 husbands and countless enemies. Nothing surprised her anymore. Until today, she sat on her throne, a massive chair made of black crystal that seemed to drink the light around it. Her silver skin was darker than her daughter's, marked with centuries of glowing patterns that showed her age and power. Her eyes were like frozen purple fire, and right now, they were burning with a rage that made everyone in the throne room want to run. High Commander Thane stood before her, a smile on his scarred face. He had waited all night for this moment. He had practiced what he would say. Now, watching the Queen's fury build, he felt like a hunter watching his trap close. "Say it again," Queen Vara commanded. Her voice was quiet, but it echoed through the hall like thunder. "Your daughter, my queen," Thane said slowly, enjoying every word, "has been meeting secretly with a human slave. For years. My soldiers saw them together last night. They saw the princess kiss him." The court gasped. Noble Velthari whispered to each other in shock. A princess of the royal blood kissing a human? It was unthinkable. It was disgusting. It was the greatest scandal in centuries. Queen Vara's hands gripped her throne so hard that cracks appeared in the crystal. "Bring them," she ordered. "Bring them both, now." The guards moved fast. Within minutes, David was dragged into the throne room, his hands chained behind his back. He was still wearing his dirty work clothes. His face had bruises from the soldiers who had questioned him the night before, but his eyes were clear and calm. He looked around the room at the hundreds of aliens staring at him with hate and saw only one face that mattered. Una. She was brought in through a different door, guards on each side of her. She wore a simple white dress and her face was pale. When she saw David, her eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. She stood tall, like the princess she was raised to be. The room fell silent as Queen Vara rose from her throne. She walked down the steps slowly, her long robes trailing behind her like shadows. She stopped in front of David and looked at him like he was an insect she had found in her food. "So," she said, "you are the creature that has poisoned my daughter's mind." David said nothing. He just met her gaze without fear. Queen Vara turned to Una. "Is it true? Have you been meeting this thing, in secret?" Una lifted her chin. "Yes, mother." Another gasp from the court. Thane's smile grew wider. "For how long?" The queen demanded. 4 years. 4 years. Queen Vara's voice was ice. "For 4 years, you have been sneaking around my palace like a common criminal, lying to my face, shaming our bloodline. For what? For a human? He's not just a human, mother. He's a slave," the queen shouted, and the walls seemed to shake. "He is property. He is nothing. And you have thrown away everything, your honor, your future, your crown, for nothing." Una's eyes flashed with anger. "He is more than every noble in this room. He's kind and brave and smart. He sees me, mother. Not the crown. Not the power. Me. When was the last time anyone in this palace saw me? Queen Vara stared at her daughter like she was looking at a stranger. This was not the quiet, obedient princess she had raised. This was something else. Something dangerous. You are confused, the queen said, trying to sound calm. This creature has tricked you. Humans are known for their lies. He saw a chance to rise above his station, and he used you. That is not true. Then what is he to you? Queen Vara demanded. Answer me. What do you call this human? The throne room went completely silent. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting. Yuna looked at David. He shook his head slightly, trying to tell her to be careful, to protect herself. But Yuna was done being careful. She was done hiding. She was done being afraid. She turned back to her mother and spoke in a clear, strong voice that reached every corner of the room. I call him husband. The reaction was instant. Nobles screamed in outrage. Guards drew their weapons. Thane laughed out loud, his victory complete. The princess had just destroyed herself in front of the entire empire. Queen Vara's face went through a dozen emotions in 1 second. Shock, confusion, betrayal, and finally, a rage so deep and hot that it seemed to burn the air around her. She spun toward David, her hand raised like she was about to strike him down with pure power. Why does my daughter call you husband, human? Her voice shook the palace. Windows cracked. Weaker nobles fell to their knees. This was the voice of a queen who had destroyed worlds. A queen who had never been defied. Everyone expected David to beg, to cry, to fall down and plead for his worthless human life. David did none of those things. He looked at the most powerful being he had ever seen. This ancient queen who could kill him with a thought. And he answered her question. Because she chose me, he said simply. And I chose her. The queen blinked. What? That is what marriage means on Earth. It is not about bloodlines or power or politics. It is about two people looking at each other and saying, I see you. All of you. The good and the bad. And I choose you anyway. David paused, his voice growing stronger. Your daughter is the most amazing person I have ever met. She is kind when your empire teaches cruelty. She is curious when your people value only obedience. She is brave enough to love someone she was taught to hate. He took a step forward, and the guards raised their weapons. But David did not stop. You ask why she calls me husband? Because I love her. Not for her power. Not for her crown. I love her for the way she laughs when she is truly happy. For the questions she asks at midnight. For the dreams she has never told anyone else. I love her because she is Yuna, and I would die 1,000 deaths before I stopped. The throne room was silent. No one knew what to say. No one had ever heard a human speak like this. With pride. With dignity. With love, Queen Vara stared at David for a long moment. Her rage was still there, burning in her eyes. But there was something else too. Something she had not felt in a very long time. Doubt. You speak pretty words, human, she said finally. But words are easy. Anyone can say they would die for love. Then let me prove it, David said. The queen raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? David took a breath. He was about to gamble everything on memory. A story Yuna had told him about ancient Velthari laws. I call upon the trial of worthiness, he said. The old law that lets anyone claim a royal as their mate if they can prove themselves worthy. Gasps filled the room. Thane's smile disappeared. The queen's eyes went wide. That law has not been used in 3,000 years, she said slowly. But it still exists. You cannot deny me the right to try. Queen Vara looked at this human, this slave, this impossible creature who had turned her world upside down. Part of her wanted to kill him right now and be done with it. But another part, a part she thought had died centuries ago, was curious that no human had ever faced the trials. No human could possibly survive. Maybe watching him fail would teach her daughter a lesson. Maybe it would show the Empire that humans were as weak as everyone believed. Or maybe a tiny voice whispered, "Maybe he will surprise you." "Very well," Queen Vara said. "You will face the trial of worthiness. 3 tests of combat, mind, and will. If you pass, you may keep your life and your claim. If you fail," she smiled coldly, "you will wish I had killed you today." David nodded. "I accept." Yuna cried out, but guards held her back. She screamed his name as they dragged her away. David watched her go, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. He had bought them a chance. A small one. But for now, it was enough. The trials would begin tomorrow, and David Park was going to show the Velthari Empire what a human was really made of. The proving grounds were ancient. They had been built 10,000 years ago, when the Velthari were still young and had to fight for everything they had. Great stone walls rose up like mountains, and the arena floor was stained with the blood of countless warriors who had tried to prove their worth. Today, those walls were filled with people. News of the human who loved a princess had spread across the Empire overnight. Billions watched on screens throughout Velthari space. They came to see a slave be destroyed. They came to laugh at human weakness. David stood alone in the center of the arena. He wore simple clothes and had no weapons. Across from him, 3 Velthari warriors were stretching and checking their blades. Each one was twice his size. Each one had trained for war since childhood. They were laughing about how quickly this would end in the royal box. Queen Vara sat with cold eyes. Beside her, Yuna gripped the arms of her chair so hard her knuckles had turned white. She had begged her mother all night to stop this. The queen had refused. High Commander Thane stood near the queen, smiling. He had personally chosen the 3 warriors. They were his best killers. A horn sounded. The first trial had begun. The 3 warriors spread out, surrounding David. They moved slowly, enjoying the moment. The leader pointed his sword at David's chest. "Any last words, little human?" David looked at each of them carefully. He noted how they moved, where they put their weight, how they held their weapons. Humans had survived on Earth for thousands of years by being smart when they could not be strong. David was very smart. "Just one," David said. "Sorry about this." He ran straight at the leader. The warrior laughed and swung his blade in a wide arc that should have cut David in half. But David was not there anymore. He had dropped to his knees and slid across the sandy ground, passing under the blade. As he slid, he grabbed a handful of sand and threw it into the warrior's eyes. The warrior screamed and stumbled back, blinded. David was already moving. He grabbed the warrior's arm and twisted it in a way that made a horrible snapping sound. The sword fell, and David caught it. The crowd went silent. This was not supposed to happen. The other 2 warriors attacked together, their blades flashing in the sunlight. David did not try to block them. He was not strong enough for that. Instead, he moved. He ducked and rolled and jumped, always staying one step ahead of their weapons. He was not fighting like a Velthari. He was fighting like a human, dirty, desperate, refusing to play by their rules. One warrior swung at his head. David dropped flat, and the blade passed over him. But the warrior had swung too hard. He was off balance for just a moment. David kicked his legs out from under him and stabbed down before the warrior could recover. 2 down. 1 to go. The last warrior was smarter. He had seen what David could do now. He kept his distance and waited for an opening. They circled each other for a long minute. David was tired. His arms were shaking. He could not keep this up forever. He needed to end it now. He pretended to stumble. The warrior saw his chance and lunged forward. But David's stumble was a lie. He spun aside and drove his blade into the warrior's side as he passed. 3 down. The arena was completely silent. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. And someone else. And soon the whole crowd was cheering. They had come to see human weakness. Instead, they had seen something they did not understand. They had seen human survival in the royal box. Thane's smile was gone. Queen Vara's eyes were thoughtful. Yuna was crying with joy. The second trial came 3 days later, after David's wounds had been treated. This time, he faced no warriors. Instead, he was brought to a room filled with strange machines and puzzles. Valkyrie scholars had designed the challenges. They tested logic, strategy, and quick thinking. David sat at a table and looked at the first puzzle. It was a complex web of lights and switches that he needed to arrange in a certain pattern. The scholars gave him 1 hour to finish 20 puzzles. He finished in 40 minutes. The Valkyrie way of thinking was logical and straight. They saw a puzzle and looked for the correct answer. But David did not look for the correct answer. He looked for any answer that worked. Sometimes that meant breaking the puzzle apart and rebuilding it differently. Sometimes it meant finding tricks the scholars had not expected. For the strategy test, they put him in a simulation of a space battle. He was given a small fleet against a much larger enemy. The Valkyrie expected him to fight with honor, to face the enemy directly and lose with dignity. David did not fight with honor. He ran away, stretched out the enemy fleet, picked off ships one by one, and used asteroids as weapons. He fought like a human. He fought to win. When the second trial ended, David had achieved the highest score in 3,000 years. The scholars were shocked. Some said he had cheated. But there was no proof in the royal box. Thane was no longer smiling at all. The third trial was the worst. They put David in a small dark room. No light, no sound, no touch. Complete sensory deprivation. The Valkyrie used this as torture. Even their strongest warriors could only last a few hours before their minds broke. The voices in their heads became too loud. The darkness became too heavy. They would scream and beg and lose themselves forever. David was left in the room for 3 days. He should have gone mad. He should have been a broken shell when they opened the door. Instead, the guards found him sitting in the corner, singing softly to himself. His voice was rough and tired, but he was singing an old Korean song about spring, about waiting through a long, cold winter for the warmth to return. His grandmother had taught him that song. She had survived war and poverty and loss. She had told him that the secret to survival was simple. Just wait. Keep breathing. Keep hoping. Spring always comes. David looked up at the guards with tired but clear eyes. Is it time for round 4? He asked. The guards did not know what to say. News of David's survival spread through the empire like fire. The human who would not break. The slave who had passed trials that would destroy most Valkyrie. People were amazed. Some were inspired. Some were angry. Thane was very, very angry. That night, he went to Queen Vara. This is a trick, he insisted. The human must have cheated. No lower species could do what he has done. And yet he did it, the queen said. She was looking out a window at the stars. Perhaps we have underestimated humans. My queen, please. Let me face him. Let me face him. Personal combat. A duel to the death. By our law, I can challenge anyone who claims a royal. End this now, before this creature embarrasses us further. Queen Vara was silent for a long moment. Part of her wanted to protect the human. He had earned that much. But Thane was right about the law. And perhaps this was the best solution. Let Thane kill the human in fair combat. Show the Empire that Valthyri's strength was still supreme. Her daughter would mourn, but she would recover. She was young. Very well, the Queen said. You may issue your challenge. Tomorrow, the human faces you. Thane bowed, hiding his smile. The human had been lucky so far. But luck could not save him from the High Commander in his cell. David heard the news from a sympathetic guard. Thane had challenged him. A duel to the death. Tomorrow. David closed his eyes and thought about Yuna, about her smile, about the future they had dreamed of. He had come so far, survived so much. But Thane was different. Thane was a killer, a monster, maybe the most dangerous fighter in the Empire. David was scared. He was not too proud to admit that. But he was also something else. He was stubborn. He had promised Yuna he would fight for her. And humans did not break promises. No matter the cost, tomorrow, David would face the High Commander. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn what humanity really meant. The Grand Arena was the largest building in the Valthyri Empire. It could hold 1 million people, and today every seat was filled. Billions more watched from screens across 100 worlds. Everyone wanted to see how the story would end. The human slave against the High Commander. Love against power. Hope against hate. David walked onto the arena floor alone. He wore simple fighting clothes and carried a single sword. It was not a good sword, just standard military equipment. Thane had made sure David got nothing special. Across from him, Thane entered to the sound of cheering crowds. He was dressed in his finest armor, black and silver with glowing blue lines. His sword was legendary, forged in the heart of a dying star. He had killed hundreds with that blade. Today, he would kill one more in the royal box. Queen Vara sat in her throne, her face showing nothing. Beside her, Yuna was pale but determined. She had not slept. She had spent all night praying to gods she did not believe in. Please, she had whispered. Please, let him live. The horn sounded. The duel began. Thane attacked immediately, not giving David any time to prepare. His blade was a silver blur, faster than eyes could follow. David barely managed to block the first strike, and the force of it nearly knocked him off his feet. The second strike cut his arm. The third opened a gash across his chest. Thane was playing with him. Everyone could see it. He could have killed David in the first second, but that would be too quick. He wanted the human to suffer. He wanted the galaxy to see human weakness. Is this your champion, princess? Thane laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. This bleeding creature? This is who you chose over me. He kicked David in the stomach, sending him flying across the arena. David hit the ground hard and did not get up right away. Blood dripped from his wounds onto the sand. The crowd cheered for Thane. This was what they had expected. This was right. The natural order restored, but then something strange happened. David stood up. Thane frowned and attacked again. He cut David's leg. He slashed his back. He broke 2 of his ribs with a savage kick. Each time, David fell. And each time, David got back up. Why do you not stay down? Thane shouted, frustration in his voice. You cannot win. You are weak. You are nothing. David spit blood and raised his sword with shaking hands. Matey, he said, his voice rough but clear. But I am still standing. The crowd grew quiet. Something was changing. Something they did not understand. This human should be dead. He should have given up long ago. But he kept standing. He kept fighting. Not because he could win, but because he refused to lose. David started talking as he fought. His voice carried across the silent arena. You think humans are weak because we die easily, he said, blocking a strike that almost took his head. You think we are lesser because we only live for 80 years while you live for thousands. He ducked under a blade and tried to strike back. Thane blocked easily, but David did not stop. But you have it backwards. We are strong because we die easily. We know every day could be our last. So we fill those days with meaning, with love, with hope, with things worth dying for. Thane's attacks grew wilder, less controlled. He was used to enemies who broke, who begged, who gave up. This human would not break. You have thousands of years, David continued, blood running down his face. And what do you do with them? You conquer. You collect. You guard what you have and take from others. You are so afraid of losing that you have forgotten how to live. He stumbled, and Thane saw his chance. He swung his legendary blade in a killing arc, aiming for David's neck. But David did something impossible. He did not try to block. He did not try to dodge. Instead, he stepped forward into the blade, letting it cut deep into his shoulder. But that step brought him inside Thane's guard. And David's sword, his simple, ordinary sword, found the gap in Thane's armor. Both men froze. Thane's blade was buried in David's shoulder. David's blade was pressed against Thane's heart. One push, and the High Commander would die. How? Thane whispered. How did you? Because I was willing to die, David said simply. And you were not. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, David pulled his sword back. He stepped away from Thane and let his weapon fall to the ground. I will not kill you, David said. Not because I cannot, because I choose not to. That is what makes us different. You fight for power. I fight for love. Power ends when the fighting stops. Love goes on forever. Thane stared at him, shame and confusion on his face. He could attack now. He could kill the human while he was unarmed. But somehow, he could not move. For the first time in his life, High Commander Thane felt small. Queen Vara stood up from her throne. The entire arena fell silent, waiting to see what she would do. She walked down from the royal box, slowly crossing the arena floor. Her long robes trailed behind her, and her ancient eyes never left David's face. She stopped in front of him, looking at this broken, bleeding human who had done the impossible. You would have died, she said softly. Yes, for my daughter. For Yuna. For love. For the chance to stand here and show you that humans are more than you think we are. David swayed on his feet but did not fall. I would die for her every day if I had to. But I would rather live for her. I would rather spend whatever time I have making her smile. That is all I want. Not power, not glory. Just her. Queen Vara looked at him for a long time. She had lived for 800 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had forgotten what love felt like. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to feel it. But looking at this human, she remembered. She remembered her first husband, who had died in a war. She remembered the pain of losing him. And she remembered the joy of the years they had together. Those years were worth the pain. Love was worth the pain. She turned to face her people, to face the billions watching across the stars. The human has passed the trials, she announced, her voice echoing through the arena and across 100 worlds. He has shown courage in combat, wisdom in thought, and strength of will. By the old laws, he has earned his place. She turned back to David, and for the first time in centuries, she smiled. Welcome to the family, son. Yuna screamed with joy. She ran from the royal box, pushing past guards, and threw herself into David's arms. He caught her, gasping at the pain in his wounds, but holding her tight anyway. You did it, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. You crazy, stubborn, wonderful human. You did it. I told you I would, David said, pressing his forehead against hers. I promised. The crowd was silent for a moment. They did not know how to react. Everything they believed about humans had been wrong. This was not a weak creature. This was not an animal. This was someone who loved so deeply that he would face death itself for that love. Then, somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping. And someone else. And someone else. Until the entire arena was roaring with cheers. Not for the High Commander. Not for Valthyri's strength, but for David. For love. For humanity. The wedding was held 1 month later, after David's wounds had healed. It was the largest celebration in the history of the Empire. Humans and Valthyri danced together in the streets. Old hatreds began to fade. New friendships began to form. David became known as the Human Prince, a bridge between two worlds. He never forgot where he came from. He never stopped being proud of his humanity. But he also learned to love his new home and the strange, wonderful people who lived there. 2 years later, Yuna gave birth to their first child. A little girl with silver skin like her mother, but her father's stubborn jaw and warm eyes. Queen Vara held her grandchild for the first time and wept. She had not cried in 1,000 years. "She is beautiful," the queen said. "She is perfect," Yuna agreed. David looked at his daughter, at his wife, at the family he had found in the most unlikely place in the universe. He thought about his grandmother, about her songs of waiting for spring. He thought about his parents, about everything they had taught him about strength and love. "She has your spirit," Queen Vara said to David. "She has her mother's courage," David replied. "She has," the queen said quietly, looking at the tiny girl with wonder in her eyes. Humanity's hope. And far across the galaxy, on a little blue planet called Earth, no one knew that one of their own had changed the course of history. They did not know that a simple engineer named David Park had proven something important. Something that the universe would never forget. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest or the fastest or the longest lived. But they had something special. Something that could not be measured or explained. They had heart. And sometimes, against all odds, heart was enough. The end.